Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon so that you never miss any video lesson from Rao's IAS Study Circle. Welcome to the Daily News Simplified, an analysis of the Hindu newspaper from UPSC perspective. Today we will discuss the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 20th June 2022. And the articles that we will discuss today are displayed on your screen. So let us start the discussion. Now before starting today's discussion, there is an important announcement for the people who are appearing for the mains examination of 2022. The Rao's IAS has come up with its quality improvement program and test series for the optional subject. These include 8 subjects at the Delhi Center, which include geography, history, anthropology, psychology, sociology, public administration, political science and international relations, and economics. While at the Bangalore Center, the QIP and the test series will be conducted for public administration, geography, sociology, and history. And you can use this as a great opportunity to sharpen your skills in the optional subjects for the mains examination of 2022. This article on page number 8 is related to the recent ministerial conference that was held of the World Trade Organization. And this ministerial conference is important because it has finalized various important agreements related to important issues of our time. And that is why the outcomes of this WTO's ministerial conference has been termed as Geneva Package, because this ministerial conference took place at Geneva. In this regard, there were various debates regarding all the agreements that have been finalized. And developed countries had different arguments, while the developing countries also had certain arguments. And that is why the outcomes have been a compromise on the arguments forwarded by the developed and the developing countries. In this regard, the decisions have been made with regards to waiver on COVID vaccines related to global food security. An agreement has also been finalized related to unregulated fisheries. And finally, and also a moratorium on the imposition of custom duties on electronic transmissions has been extended till the next ministerial conference. In this regard, we will try to understand the important decisions that have been taken at this WTO's ministerial conference, what were the debates, and what has been the outcome in this regard. Now, the outcomes of the Geneva package are primarily important because the negotiations at the WTO normally take place for a very long period of time, and at times at the ministerial conferences, no outcomes are found. However, at this Geneva Ministerial Conference, there were 4 decisions that were taken, and that is why it has been termed as a historic ministerial conference because of these outcomes. So the agreements have been finalized with regards to trade and health, especially in the context of the COVID-19 vaccines, and in this regard, a waiver has been provided to COVID-19 vaccine production for next 5 years. Also, with regards to agriculture, decision has been finalized with regards to ensuring the global food security. Further, in order to curb unregulated fishing and unsustainable fishing, the agreement has been finalized on fishery subsidies. And also, the WTO members have agreed to maintain current practice of not imposing the custom duties on electronic transmissions until the Ministerial Conference 13. So in this regard, let us look at the Ministerial Conference, how it is organized, and also how does the Ministerial Conference take its decisions. Now, from the prelims examination perspective, if we look at the Ministerial Conference, it is the topmost decision-making body of the World Trade Organization, and it usually meets every 2 years. Now, the Ministerial Conferences are important because they bring together all the members of the World Trade Organization. And this Ministerial Conference can take decisions on all matters under any of the multilateral trade agreements. Further, with regards to decision making at the Ministerial Conference of the World Trade Organization, the decisions are taken by consensus and not by majority. And that is what makes WTO unique in nature, because the decisions or the voting rights at other institutions like IMF and the World Bank are decided on the basis of the voting quota. However, here all the decisions are taken on the basis of consensus, that is, one member has one vote. Further, there is General Council in WTO, which is composed of representatives of all the members, and it oversees the operations of agreements and the ministerial decisions on a regular basis. It also acts as a dispute settlement body and a trade policy review body. Further, at WTO, there is Director General, who is appointed for a period of 4 years by the Ministerial Conference. So these are some facts related to Ministerial Conference, where consensus-based decision making is an important aspect which we need to know from the prelims examination perspective. After this, let us look at the outcomes of this Ministerial Conference in detail and the various debates surrounding these outcomes. So the first outcome is related to Declaration on Food Security, which is related to agriculture-related outcome. In this regard, we all are aware that the Russia-Ukraine crisis has adversely impacted the global food security. And also India had recently banned export of wheat owing to the high inflation in the wheat prices in India. And that is why the global food security is being threatened because of humanitarian crisis and the unavailability of the food items like cereals in the global food market. Now, the impact of the Russia-Ukraine war has been very adverse on the global food security, primarily because Russia and Ukraine were amongst the top wheat exporters in the world. Now, if you look at the five biggest wheat exporters of the world, it includes Russia, US, Australia, Canada, and Ukraine. So we can see that Russia and Ukraine are amongst the top five wheat exporters in the world. And because of the Russia-Ukraine war, such exports have been disrupted. Further, we all are aware that India has put a ban on the export of wheats because of increasing inflation in the food items in India. So, in this backdrop, the Declaration on Food Security of the World Trade Organization assumes importance. So, let us look at what was the debate surrounding the Declaration on Food Security and what has been the outcome here. Now, as we are aware that India has banned the export of wheat because of the rising food prices in India. Here, the developed countries wanted a blanket ban on export restrictions and the prohibitions that are imposed by various countries. So, for example, in case of India, the developed countries would have wanted that India should not impose any restrictions or the ban that India has imposed on the wheat exports. However, as opposed to the developed countries, the developing countries were against any such blanket ban to ensure their domestic food security. And also, India had argued that it will allow government to government purchase. However, it will not exempt all the exports from India related to wheat. So, the outcome in this case at the WTO Declaration on Food Security has been a compromise of the positions of both developed countries and the developing countries. And this agreement will ensure availability, accessibility, and affordability of food to those in need, especially in humanitarian emergencies. And that is why the member countries would not impose export prohibitions or restrictions on the foodstuffs that are purchased for humanitarian purposes by the World Food Programme. So this has been the thing that has been allowed by this particular agreement of the World Trade Organization. That is, the countries cannot impose ban on the exports to the World Food Programme's humanitarian purposes related exports. Further, this agreement has encouraged the member countries with available surplus to release them on the international markets in compliance with the WTO regulations. So, especially this outcome becomes important because it will address the requirement of the food articles for the areas which are facing humanitarian crisis, where the World Food Programme is playing a key role. Also, this agreement is important because it has highlighted or instituted a work program to come up with measures to help least developed countries and net food importing developing countries and enhance their domestic food security and agricultural production. However, despite this outcome, there are various unresolved issues related to agriculture. These are permissible public stockholding, threshold for domestic food security, domestic support to agriculture, cotton related issues, and market access related issues. Now, these issues related to public stockholding, etc., are beyond the scope of discussion of this video. However, these topics will be included in the mains compass magazines. Because here, primarily, we are concerned with the outcomes of the WTO's conference or the agreements that have been finalized and what were the debates surrounding this. So, primarily, this agreement is related to ensuring food security, especially in those areas which are facing humanitarian crisis, so that the World Food Programme does not face any difficulty in procuring the food grains, especially wheat. The next important outcome of this ministerial conference is related to agreement on harmful fisheries subsidies. Now, we all are aware that the governments have been providing subsidies to various sectors in the economy. And in this regard, the governments have been providing subsidies to the fishery sector also. However, there are various practices in the fishery sector which are unsustainable, unregulated, and harmful to the sustainability of the ocean stock of fisheries. And that is why the WTO wanted to ban such subsidies related to harmful practices in the fisheries sector. And that is why this multilateral agreement is important, because it contributes to protection of global oceans. Now, this agreement on harmful fishery subsidies is in line with the UN Sustainable Development Goal 14.6. And it includes a strong prohibition of subsidies which contribute to illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing with unprecedented transparency provisions. Secondly, it includes an absolute prohibition of subsidies for fishing on the unregulated high seas beyond the exclusive economic zones of the countries. In this regard, a dedicated trust fund has also been provided to provide technical assistance and capacity building for the developing countries to implement the agreement. However, there are two exceptions that have been provided here. So what are these exceptions? The only exception is for continuing the subsidies for overfished stock is when they are deemed essential to rebuild them to a biologically sustainable development. Now, for example, if any kind of practice related to fishery is undergoing in the high seas also, however, that is important in order to carry out or rebuild the fishery stock at a biologically sustainable level, in that case, the subsidy will be available. Further, there would be no limitation on the subsidies that are granted or maintained by the developing or the least developed countries for fishing within their exclusive economic zone. So this right is available only to developing and the least developed countries. So that is why this is also one of the important agreements that has been finalized by the WTO. The third important agreement is related to moratorium on electronic transmissions. In this regard, the WTO has agreed to extend the current moratorium or current practice of not imposing the custom duties on electronic transmissions until the next ministerial conference. So the present practice is that the custom duties cannot be imposed on any electronic transmissions, and WTO has carried forward or has continued with this practice of not imposing the custom duties. However, this will further be discussed at the 13th ministerial conference, that will be the next ministerial conference of the World Trade Organizations. This brings us to what are these electronic transmissions. So simply, these electronic transmissions consist of online deliveries such as music, e-books, films, softwares and video games. Now these electronic transmissions are unique and important because they differ from other cross-border e-commerce because these are ordered online and are not delivered physically. For example, if you order a printed book across the border, this will be delivered to you in a physical format. However, if you order an e-book, it will not be delivered to you physically. And that is why these electronic transmissions are important. Now, there was also a debate surrounding this particular issue. So the argument of the developed countries like US, UK, Australia, China and Japan, they had sought the extension of this moratorium, that is, no custom duty should be imposed on such electronic transmissions. And these countries argued that such a moratorium would help maintain certainty, predictability for the businesses and the consumers, particularly in the context of the pandemic. However, the developing countries were opposed to the stand of the developed countries and they opposed this moratorium because they wanted to impose custom duties on such electronic transmissions. So the developing countries wanted a clearance on the imposition of custom duties on such transmissions. Further, the developing countries wanted to impose these customs in order to generate more revenues from the customs and thereby facilitate more investments in these fields. And they submitted that extending the duty-free market access without any custom duties due to moratorium has resulted in a loss of $10 billion per annum globally, and 95% of which was borne by the developing countries. And that is why we argued that we should be allowed to impose custom duties on such electronic transmissions. Now, normally what happens is that custom duties are imposed only when there is a surge in import of any particular entity. For example, if steel imports in India have risen considerably in the past few years, India will try to impose an anti-dumping duty or a custom duty so that the import of the steel can be discouraged. So that has been the purpose of the custom duties till now. However, in this present case, we want to impose these custom duties in order to provide necessary capital infusion for capacity building and also attempting to address the digital divide, especially in low-income and developing countries, which has increased because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we want to impose custom duties, collect that money and use it as capital infusion and investment in this particular field so that the digital divide can be bridged. So this will be different case as compared to other cases where the custom duties are imposed. So this was the whole argument of the developing country. So what has been the outcome here? Outcome has been that the countries have agreed to extend the current moratorium of not imposing any custom duties on electronic transmissions until the next ministerial conference. That is, the demand of the developing countries has not been met in this particular case. And the last issue is related to patent relaxation or patent waiver of the COVID vaccines. Here, India had demanded that the waiver should be provided on patents related to vaccines, health equipments, as well as different other health related things. However, the agreement has only focused upon the waiver for the production of COVID vaccine, and that too for a period of only 5 years. So the ministerial conference has agreed on authorizing the use of subject matter of a patent for producing COVID-19 vaccines by a member country without the consent of the rights holder. So this particular term, that is without the consent of the right holders, simply means that a waiver has been provided on the production of the vaccines. Further, it has asked the member countries to waive the requirements, including export restrictions, to supply domestic markets and the member countries with any number of vaccines. Now, this issue of patent waiver on the COVID vaccine has been discussed in detail in the previous DNS video. So, we will revise from that particular DNS video what is meant by the waiver on the patent related to COVID vaccine and what has been the demand of India in this regard. So, this was all about the outcomes of the ministerial conference, and let us revise the issue related to waiver on the patents related to COVID vaccine development. So to understand this issue of waiver of patents, let us first understand what exactly is a patent. So a patent is an exclusive right granted for an invention. It can be both product or a process. Now such a product and process provides in general a new way of doing something or offers a new technical solution to a problem. Now we all are aware that medicines have been used for treating different kinds of diseases. But in the year 2020, we were faced with the COVID-19 pandemic. And that is why various companies started research and development on the development of vaccines against the COVID-19 pandemic. And that is why when the vaccines were created, they were something new. They were a kind of technical solution to a problem. So this was a new innovation that was conducted by the pharmaceutical companies. And that is why for such kind of invention, or you can say innovation, these companies are provided with intellectual property rights. So these are exclusive rights. So what kind of protection is provided by a patent? So in this regard, in principle, the patent owner has the exclusive right to prevent or stop others from commercially exploiting the patented invention. In other words, patent protection means that the invention cannot be commercially made, used, distributed, imported, or sold by others without the patent owner's consent. And this exactly is the issue related to the COVID-19 pandemic and the vaccine development and the patents that have been provided to these vaccines. So on the one hand, we are concerned about protecting the rights of the pharmaceutical companies for the innovation and the research and development that they conducted in the development of these vaccines. And on the other hand, we are concerned about the access to these vaccines for some of the least developed or the underdeveloped countries. And if you are aware, the new variant of COVID-19, Omicron, had developed in South Africa, which has one of the least vaccination rates. And in general, African continent has lesser access to the COVID-19 vaccines because of underdevelopment, etc. And that is why this issue was raised by India that a waiver should be provided against such patents so that the access to the vaccines can be increased to these underdeveloped countries. So how does a waiver on patents works? So what happens in normal circumstances? In normal circumstances, a company or a pharmaceutical company has exclusive right to manufacture the product for next 20 years. However, in this process also, a company has an alternative to increase the reach of the vaccine. What is it? In this case, a company can enter into a voluntary licensing agreement with other manufacturers. And in such a case, when a company enters into voluntary licensing agreement, they can then transfer the technology and know-how of manufacturing a pharmaceutical drug. That is, this can happen only when a company enters into a voluntary licensing agreement with other companies. Now, one of the prime examples of voluntary licensing agreement is the company Gilead, which is a company of United States of America, which produces the remdesivir injections. In this line, the Gilead had entered into voluntary licensing agreement with Indian pharmaceutical companies such as Dr. Reddy's Laboratory to manufacture the remdesivir injections. So this is a kind of voluntary licensing agreement regime. Now, as opposed to such normal circumstances where the company has the exclusive right to manufacture and also it has the right to enter into a voluntary licensing agreement, is the issue of waiver on patent. That is, the patents should be waived for these vaccines that have been developed to fight the COVID-19 pandemic. In this regard, in case of a waiver, when a waiver has been provided on the patents against any vaccine or any medicine, any pharmaceutical company would be allowed to manufacture the vaccine, medicines without having a patent or without even entering into a voluntary licensing agreement with the patent holder. So in the previous case, the manufacturing company had to enter into a voluntary licensing agreement with the company which had produced the vaccine in the first place and had got it patented. However, under a waiver regime, any company with medicine related experience can start producing the vaccine without even entering into a voluntary licensing agreement. So this is the basic difference between how a patent works in normal circumstances and how a patent works under a waiver regime. So in that case, the pharma companies would have complete freedom to carry out reverse engineering and manufacture the patented product. And the company would have complete freedom in fixing the prices, and also the company would not be liable to pay any compensation to the patent holder. Now this waiver was intended to be provided so that it can lead to increased manufacturing of the vaccines, because any pharmaceutical company can then start producing the vaccine. And in that case, if the vaccine production increases, it will then lead to increased access to these vaccines, because the price will also drop and its reach will also increase. So this was supposed to be the biggest benefit of providing waiver on the patents. Now, after looking at the issue of waiver on the patents, let us look at how a waiver is provided for products under the WTO agreements. Let us look at this issue. So a waiver under the WTO treaties can be decided at the WTO Ministerial Conference only through consensus among all the member countries. So all the countries who are member of the WTO will have to create a consensus so that such a waiver can be provided. In this regard, the waiver needs to contain a justification based on the exceptional circumstances, and we all are aware that COVID-19 was an exceptional circumstance in case of medical emergency that the world has faced. And these waivers are reviewed by the Ministerial Conference annually until its termination. Now the issue here is that the decisions at the WTO are taken by consensus and not by any majority vote. And that is why countries which were not in favor of providing waivers against these patents voted against providing the waiver to the patents of vaccines. And that is why this waiver could not be provided for in the end. And we all are aware that India and South Africa were the leading countries which proposed the waiver on the vaccines, because India is also one of the biggest manufacturers of the vaccine, and so that it would have helped the manufacturing companies related to pharmaceuticals in India to produce more number of vaccines and export them to the underdeveloped countries like the African countries. However, this did not get passed because it was opposed by various countries, and that was primarily because the decisions at the WTO are taken by consensus. In this backdrop, let us first understand what exactly are the benefits of patent waiver. So first and foremost benefit of patent waiver, or the supporters of the patent waiver say that it will be crucial in saving lives, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic and also in case of future pandemics. So in this regard, the technological breakthrough that has been achieved in the form of vaccines or the medicines has mainly benefited only the developed countries. And in this background, a patent waiver could provide for equitable and inclusive approach to deal with the COVID-19 as well as future pandemics. Second is that it helps in promoting the public funded research. How is it so? So most of the pharmaceutical companies, particularly in the advanced countries such as United States of America, had received huge grants from the governments to undertake research and development to develop vaccines and medicines. So this is also a case for providing waiver against the patents, because normally what happens is that the pharmaceutical companies undertake research and development based on their own money. But in this case, the USA's government had also invested or provided grants to these pharmaceutical companies to conduct research and development to develop the vaccines. And that is why a significant chunk of the research and development expenditure was also incurred by the governments. And that is why, because the government is providing grants to these companies, it would be prudent to provide for temporary waivers on the patents. Further, it is one of the best bet to fight the pandemic. That is, it will promote global cooperation to fight the crisis. Second is, it will ramp up the production of vaccines, medicines, and will flatten the curve. And third is, it will lead to equitable distribution of the vaccines and also will be very helpful in availability of vaccines at an affordable cost. And last but not the least, it will help in saving livelihoods, because the impact of pandemic has been such that 1.4% of the global population was pushed into extreme poverty. and 90% of the countries in the world faced GDP contraction. Also, the current mechanisms for the exemption of patents, such as compulsory licensing and parallel imports, are both time consuming as well as complex process. Compulsory licensing is simply when a government says that the companies which have the patents will keep on producing the vaccines, but at the same time other companies which can produce the vaccines will also be provided with the license so that they can also produce the vaccines. So this is how a compulsory licensing regime works. Further, if a company that has been provided with the patent for a vaccine or a medicine, and if it is not able to produce more number of vaccine and a country is facing the issue of pandemic or any kind of health emergency, then the country can provide for parallel imports. That is, it can lead to import of vaccines from the other countries. That is how the patent right of the company which has patented the vaccine will also be affected. However, there has been opposition to such patent waiver. So let us look at the arguments that have been forwarded in opposition to the patent waiver. Now, in this regard, pharmaceutical companies and some of the advanced economies believe that a temporary waiver is a simple solution to a very complex problem. That is, a waiver will not actually lead to increase in production or decrease in the prices and can end up affecting the interest of the global community at large. In this regard, they highlight that the lack of access to the vaccine and the high prices of vaccines is not just because of the patent regime, but it is because of the bottlenecks in the COVID-19 vaccine production. And if a waiver is provided against patents, it will discourage investment in research and development for undertaking further development in the field of medicines, vaccines, as well as diagnostic. Further, they have highlighted that apart from patents, there are other extrinsic factors which also affect the availability of the vaccines as well as the prices of the vaccines. That is, these factors include availability of raw materials, technological know-how, manufacturing capacity, and these are the factors which are also hindering the increased production of the COVID-19 vaccines as well as the prices of these vaccines. Further, there is complexity in manufacturing of the medicines and vaccines, and not all companies are capable enough to produce these vaccines. And this complexity in manufacturing of medicines and vaccines prevents the pharma companies from entering into voluntary licensing agreement with the pharma companies in poor and developing countries. Also, such a waiver will lead to lower profit margins for the pharma companies because they mainly sell the vaccines to the government at lower prices. And despite temporary waiver on the patents, lower profit margins may prevent the pharma companies from manufacturing the vaccines as well as the medicines. That is, you cannot force a company to produce the vaccines, and that is why such kind of waiver will discourage these companies to produce more number of vaccines. Also, issues have been highlighted related to problem of quality control. That is, if waiver is provided and other companies are also producing or less capable pharma companies are producing these vaccines, the vaccine which is produced might not be of a great quality. And also, the process of providing a waiver on the patents at the WTO is an extremely time consuming and complex process because the decision at the WTO can be taken only through consensus, and all the countries of the world will have to come on board to provide this waiver against patents for the COVID-19 vaccine. And that is why this is also one of the arguments that has been forwarded against providing waiver against the patents for COVID-19 vaccines. This article on page number 7 talks about an important issue that is related to patents in order to boost research and development and innovations in our country. In this regard, we are aware that there are various micro, small, and medium enterprises which are involved in various innovations. However, all of these innovations do not get the protection of the patents in this regard. And that is why the authors in this article suggest an alternative to the present patent regime, which is known as utility model, which has been adopted by various European countries in order to provide boost to the innovations by these micro, small, and medium enterprises. And we are aware that looking at the contributions of the MSME in the Indian economy, this particular kind of utility regime or utility model, if provides protection to the innovations, can give a big boost to the research and development. So in this context, let us try and understand what exactly is a patent and how is the patent regime in India presently, and also what is this utility model and how does it stand compared to the original patent process. So as we have also learned in the previous article, a patent is a statutory right for an invention that is granted for a limited period. Now, upon being granted, the patent holder enjoys exclusive monopoly with respect to three things. First is making and using as well as selling the patented product or process for a certain period of time. Now, these patents have been given protection under the World Trade Organization's trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights, or the TRIPS as it is called. And under this agreement, the member countries provide protection to the patents for a minimum period of 20 years. That is, during these period of 20 years, no other company can produce a similar kind of product. However, once the 20 years are complete, or once the period of the patent expires, this particular invention then enters the public domain and anyone can commercially exploit the invention without infringing the patent. Now, in this regard, in India, there is Indian Patents Act of 1970 and it utilized three criteria for issuing patents. First was that it should be new or novel. Second is that it must involve an inventive step, that is technically advanced in comparison to the existing knowledge related to any particular issue. And third is that it should be capable of industrial application. So these are the three criteria that have been used for issuing patents. We are not getting into the details of these, but these are the broad criteria. So as an alternative to these patents, the authors suggest a utility model which is being adopted by European countries as well as other countries in order to boost the innovations and also provide protection similar to that of patents, however, on a lower scale. Now let us look at what is this utility model. Now some of the countries are adopting this model in order to promote and protect minor inventions which may not fulfill the clear criteria of the patents. And that is why for such kind of minor inventions, this utility model has been proposed. So compared with the patents, this utility model system requires compliance with less stringent requirements. It has simpler procedures and offers shorter term of protection. Now, if you look at the similarities between the patents and the utility model, both of them protect new technical inventions through granting a limited exclusive right. And this prevents others from commercially exploiting the protected inventions without the consent of the rights holders. So if somebody comes up with a minor invention, such minor invention can be protected under the utility model, which has limited exclusive rights as compared to the original patent regime. And that is why it protects the commercial exploitation of these inventions. Now this brings us to what are the differences and comparison between the patent model and the utility model. First is that the requirement for acquiring utility model is less stringent as compared to the patent regime. Both patent and utility models may have to fulfill the criteria of novelty. However, the important thing to be noted is that the criteria for inventive step may be lower or absent in case of utility model. Second important thing to be noted is that the term of protection for the utility model varies from 6 to 15 years in different countries. However, according to the WTO's TRIPS agreement, there should be a protection of patents for minimum 20 years. So as compared to the patent regime, the utility model can be for a very lesser period of time, between 6 to 15 years in different countries. So India can also adopt such kind of innovation, or India can also adopt such kind of utility model for providing protection to the minor inventions. The third is that the registration process for utility models is simpler and faster in comparison to the other patent regimes. And also in some countries, the utility model protection can only be obtained for certain fields like technology, such as mechanical devices, apparatus, and only for products, but not for processes. And unlike the patents, there is no reference of utility models in the trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights. And that is why it also provides certain amount of flexibility. And that is why it is said that India should also consider adopting this utility model regime to protect incremental or minor inventions by the MSMEs, that is micro, small and medium enterprises. And this can be a very important step in fostering and boosting innovations and research and development in India. With this, let's take up the next news article now. This article on page number 7 highlights that despite women being 50% of the overall population, their participation in the economy has been very low. In this regard, the Center for Monitoring Indian Economy (CMI) has reported lower labor participation rate of rural women vis-a-vis men in 2022. So in this article, let us try and understand what has been the women's participation in Indian economy, what has been the challenges and the impact of lower participation of women in Indian economy, and why is it important for women to participate in the Indian economy. And after that, let us look at some initiatives of the government and what needs to be done further. And all the points that we discuss here can be important for us from General Studies Paper 2 point of view in the topic social justice. Now, if you look at the participation of women in Indian economy, according to the PLFS survey or the Periodic Labour Force Survey, which is published by Ministry of Statistics, the female labour force participation rate stands at about 25.1% as compared to 57.5% for male. Further, the women's contribution to GDP hovers around only 18%, which is less than half of the global average. So this highlights that the participation of the women in the Indian economy is not optimal as compared to the global standards. Further, around 95% of the women in India are involved in unpaid labor. And approximately 85%, that is 400 million of the Indian workforce, is employed in unorganized sector, out of which 120 million are women. So this is some data related to women's participation in the Indian economy, and it clearly highlights that it is lower as compared to participation of men in the Indian economy. Now, what are the challenges related to the participation of women in the Indian economy which has hampered their participation or which has inhibited their participation? First and foremost is the lack of gender pay parity. And according to International Labour Organization, on an average, women are paid 34% less as compared to men in India. Then there are societal norms which discourage the participation of women in the Indian economy. These include taking care of the newborn, family is considered as the primary job of women, social stigma of women working outside. All of these discourage the women from participating in the economy. Then there is lack of safety and sanitation at the workplace, and this has also emerged as one of the discouraging factors for participation of women in the economy. Further, there is a glass ceiling effect which has been highlighted by various reports, which simply means that despite acknowledgement, all the companies prefer male workers, etc. And according to the McKinsey report, it highlights preference to male workers over females in promotions to key position. Then there are also issues associated with sexual harassment at workplace, and it has remained a persistent factor which contributes to lower female participation. Then there is poor work-life balance in case of women due to dual responsibility of job and household work. This brings us to why is the women's participation important in an economy. So according to Oxfam's report, it states that women and girls in India contribute 3.26 billion hours of unpaid care work every day, which represents equivalent of at least $271 billion of unpaid income in India in an year. And according to IMF, reaching gender parity would boost India's GDP by as much as 27%. Further, the World Bank reports that India's GDP growth rate would climb up by 9% if women had an equitable share of jobs. And according to the McKinsey Global Institute report, it has estimated that just by offering equal opportunities to the women, India could add up to $770 billion to its GDP by 2025. And because of all these considerations, and to increase the participation of women in the Indian economy, the Government of India has also taken various initiatives. These include providing maternity benefits to the women so that this does not act as a discouraging factor for women to participate in the economy. Second is Sexual Harassment of Workplace Act 2013, which prevents, prohibits, and also provides redressal for certain issues related to sexual harassment of women at workplace. Further, in 2018 budget, the EPF contribution by women was reduced to 8% from the 12% in order to increase their in-hand income. Also, the Beti Bachao Beti Padhao scheme aims at educating the girls, thereby enabling them to acquire required skills. And also, the Government of India has the Stand Up India scheme to promote women entrepreneurship. So these are some of the initiatives of the Government of India. But besides all of these initiatives that have been taken by the Government of India, there is a lot that needs to be done. So what needs to be done in this regard? Let us look at that. So the first and the foremost thing that needs to be done in order to boost the participation of women in the economy is to recognize and acknowledge their role in the care economy, that is the household works that women undertake. Second is strengthening and improving the sanitation and the creche facilities at workplaces. Third is provisions of acts should be enforced and supervised effectively. For example, the provisions of the Sexual Harassment at Workplace Act, Prohibition and Prevention should be implemented effectively and they should be properly supervised. Then there should be flexibility in the working conditions which should be provided to promote their participation. Also, there should be gender-specific data which should be maintained in order to improve the policy formulations. Then digital literacy and skill upgradation in line with the market demand can also provide them the quality work. And further, steps should be taken to improve women entrepreneurship, like promotion of self-help groups and streamlining of credit facilities must also be taken place. So these are various aspects of the participation of the women in the Indian economy and what needs to be done. With this, let's take up the next news article now. This article on page number 9 talks about something which is important for us from the prelims examination perspective, and already a question has been asked in the previous years. This is related to virtual reality versus augmented reality in terms of technology innovations that are taking place. Now this brings us to what is meant by virtual reality as compared to the augmented reality. Simply, the virtual reality is the use of computer modeling and simulations that enables a person to interact with an artificial three-dimensional visual or other sensory environment. A good example of virtual reality is when you are wearing a virtual reality headset and playing a computer game, for example, bike racing. In that case, a virtual environment or simulation of the reality is created virtually where you are experiencing that you are part of that virtual reality. However, in reality, that particular thing does not exist. As compared to that, augmented reality is a bit different. This is a process of combining or augmenting a video or photographic displays by overlaying the images with useful computer generated data. Now we can simply understand the difference between virtual reality and augmented reality by the way of these two pictures. In the case of virtual reality, you'll be made to wear a headset and then you can play a virtual online cricket game. And this will be a 3D modeling of the cricket experience in a virtual world. So that is what is meant by virtual reality. As compared to virtual reality, for example, in this particular picture, you see that it is a screenshot of the actual cricket match. Now, the reality of this particular photograph is augmented by the way of imposition of the trajectory of the ball in order to ascertain if an LBW appeal is legitimate or not. And this is what is meant by augmented reality, which means augmenting video or photographic displays by overlaying the images with useful computer generated data. However, as compared to this, virtual reality is simply the use of computer modeling and simulation that enables the person to interact with an artificial three-dimensional visual or other sensory environment. So this is the clear difference between the two. So this brings us to what is the difference between augmented reality versus the virtual reality. So augmented reality devices layer digital items on top of the elements from the real world, as we have seen. As compared to this, virtual reality is complete immersive experience altering your perception to make you feel like you exist in that particular virtual world. Secondly, the augmented reality enhances what you see by adding computer generated images to the view using different devices, while the virtual reality provides users with a fully digital environment with no elements from reality. Further, the AR requires only AR compatible smart devices to enjoy your experiences, while the VR requires wearing a virtual reality headset. Further, in the case of augmented reality, users can add or change their perception of the world in real time while easily distinguishing virtual items from the existing reality-related items. However, this is a completely virtual environment. So these are the clear differences between augmented reality and the virtual reality. With this, we conclude today's discussion, and this is the question for the day.